Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Berean Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Welcome to those who are joining us from home. This sermon came out of Shared Pulpit, a UU sermon writing seminar for lay leaders that I led and participated in, along with several buffers, a couple of years ago. The seminar helps participants learn to develop sermons and understand how sermons are different from essays. If hearing this sermon today inspires you to explore a topic of your own as a potential sermon, let me know. Growing up, I was fortunate to know my great aunts and great uncles on my mom's father's side. The side of my maternal grandfather, Ward Bates Shell. Grandpa's sister, Emily, was the family historian for the Shell family, and she researched our genealogy. When I was in high school, Aunt Emily found our common progenitor, Johann Christ Shell, and his sons, John Shell and John Christian Shell, my fifth great grandfather. John Christian and his brother traveled from their Baden homeland on the River Rhine in Eastern Europe to the new colonial world in 1749. They acquired land and were prominent enough for the area they lived in to be called Shell's Bush in their name. My family, my present day family, and I made a pilgrimage to that land this past summer, and it was thrilling to see the road is still named Shell's Bush today. In his new world, John Christian married a woman called Maria, and they had several children, including twin boys, Mark and Henry, my fourth great grandfather. The twins were born in 1755. The mid 1700s was a time of much unrest. And in addition to their homestead, John Christian and Maria built a blockhouse for their family's protection. In 1780, during an attack on the blockhouse by British loyalists and Iroquois natives, the twins, Mark and Henry, were captured and kidnapped. Another son was shot in the arm, and a daughter, Eve, was scalped. A description of the attack filed by an American colonel reported that the family had limited the extent of the attack by dragging the opposition leader into the blockhouse and then pretending that relief forces were on their way. During the attack, great-grandmother Maria not only reloaded guns for the men, but with well-aimed axe blows, bent the enemy gun barrels, rendering them useless. Blockhouses have these little openings that allow the people inside to put their muskets outside. And in this case, the enemy came close enough to the blockhouse to put their guns into the house. And great-grandmother Maria took her axe and with her axe bent the barrels, rendering them useless. A newspaper report stated that as the attack subsided, John Christian sang one of his favorite hymns, "A Mighty Fortress," included earlier in today's service. And you can understand why when you remember the words from the last verse, "The body they may kill, the truth abide us still." For my family, ancestor John Christian was a hero for immigrating to his new life. His wife, Maria, was a hero for defending her home. Their son, Henry, was a hero for surviving capture as a young boy. It feels really good for my ancestors' New World immigration and settlement to be wrapped in all of this heroism. But I have a concern about not knowing how they acquired their land or assimilated with their native neighbors. In 2016, my husband Jim and I traveled cross country for 6 weeks. We visited all the breathtaking national parks and state parks, and we met lots of really interesting local people. The presidential election cycle was in full swing, and we watched the Republican debates while we were on the road using our cell phones. Make America Great Again was the campaign slogan for then candidate Donald Trump. Make America Great Again implied to me that America had a history of being great, but had lost its greatness. As Jim and I saw the land and met the people of the United States, I took offense to the idea that America was anything less than great as is. How could a land as beautiful as our own, with its beautiful variety of citizens, who we found to be so kind, so welcoming, be anything less than great? But the more I learn and think about our country and its history, the more I have to wonder, was America ever great? The creation of American democratic ideals described in the US Constitution was great. But was America great when half the country fought for its right to keep those Black people enslaved? Was it great when natives were forcefully and cruelly relocated from their homelands? Is it great now when states govern women's bodies, corporations are considered people, proper health care is limited to those who can afford it, environmental protections are overturned in favor of profit and big business, treaties intended to care for the displaced Indigenous people are disregarded, and when Black men and women die in police encounters related to routine traffic stops, petty thefts, and minor misdemeanors. The first and seventh principles of Unitarian Universalism have always made sense to me. I think they're the easy ones. All people are important, number one, and number 7 is everything is related. But the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, really didn't grip me until these last 5 years. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, our second principle. Compassion comes naturally to me, but justice and equity for all people, that's a new focus. In the 7 principles in Word and Worship, the Reverend Emily Gage of Unity Temple in Chicago writes, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations points us towards something beyond inherent worth and dignity. It points us to the larger community. It gets at collective responsibility. It reminds us that treating people as human beings is not simply something we do one-on-one, but something that has systemic implications, as Hunter pointed out in his Texas high school story. Compassion is something that we can easily act on individually, as his mom did, but we need one another to achieve equity and justice. The 2016 election and the actions of its resulting administration prompted me into activism for social justice initiatives and in politics. A few days after the 2016 election, I began attending forward action meetings in Benton Harbor, and I joined my very first candlelight vigil on a street corner in St. Joseph. In 2017, I led a local assembly in St. Joseph to correspond with the National Women's March being held in Washington that year. In 2018, I circulated a petition and knocked on doors to end the gerrymandering of Michigan voting districts. In 2020, I and some other buffers joined UU the Vote to get out the vote in Michigan for the general election, and then to get out the vote in Georgia for its important Senate runoff. I am here in America because my fifth great grandfather, John Christian, immigrated from Baden on the River Rhine to a new life along the Mohawk River in what is now upstate New York. I'm here because my fourth great grandfather, twin Henry, survived his capture and was able to return to his Mohawk River homeland a few years later. My interpretation and understanding of this family history has matured since first learning the story during my high school years. There is so much more to the story than just great-grandma Maria's axe-wielding heroism. Does my family owe a debt to the Iroquois Confederacy and the Mohawk people for my ancestors' use of their Mohawk Valley land? I'm not sure. I'm researching and I'll continue to learn about it and think on it. And what about America? Yes, it has a history of greatness, but it's also failing to provide social safety nets for citizens. It's failing to care for our environment. It's missing the mark on reparations for Natives, Blacks, on equity for LGBTQI communities, on radically caring for our earth. It's missing the mark on protecting voting rights in our young democracy. Is it possible that my family coming to the New World was both good and complicated? That America today is both great and not at all great? Our Unitarian Universalist faith provides us with platform and opportunity to work together to make the most of our own lives and lift the lives of others to achieve equity and justice for all. I am here today in this pulpit because I believe in Unitarian Universalism as a living tradition, a living, growing, changing tradition. There are always new people to meet, new ideas to learn, new ways to be reflective, always learning, always changing. Next year, buffers are going to begin a journey that many other UUs have already started or in many cases finished. Next year, we are going to consider whether or not to early adopt the UUA's 8th principle. The 8th principle that is proposed reads, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." Could this focus be both affirming for some people and horrifying, uncomfortable, unnecessary for others? What I know for sure is that before proceeding with the work of considering any of these questions, it will be important to first have all parties be grounded in covenant. Covenant to trust before being suspicious. Covenant to listen before talking. Covenant to stay together as one family, one nation, one congregation, one denomination.